and welcome to From Z to X with Sean and Evita Duffy, a new podcast from the Federalist on pop culture and politics.
Hey, good to see you, Evita. So today let's talk about Amy Coney Barrett and the impact that she's having on college campuses with women. But before we do that, let's talk about Twitter, Facebook censoring the story from the New York Post on Hunter Biden and his emails and the allegation that Joe Biden is actually corrupt and has enriched his family from his position as the vice president, but also a leading Democrat in the U.S. Senate for 47 years.
Right. So, following the New York Post bombshell story, Twitter and Facebook went on a rampage of censorship. And Ted Cruz actually announced last week that the Senate will be voting to subpoena Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter. So, Adam, as a former congressman, what are your insights onto whether this vote is going to pass and what we're going to see come Friday at the hearing?
Yeah, so this week, the Senate's going to, in the committee, vote to have a subpoena for Jack Dorsey, maybe even Zuckerberg from Facebook. And what happens is any random senator or U.S. congressman can't say, I'm going to authorize a subpoena. The actual body has to authorize a subpoena. So first it goes to the committee, and if the committee authorizes the subpoena, one will go out for Jack Dorsey specifically. And Republicans have the majority in the Senate. So I'm sure that subpoena will pass, and you'll see Jack Dorsey from Twitter forced to come in and answer questions about why he seems to be censoring conservative speech and negative stories about Joe Biden, but really doesn't apply those same rules of censorship to liberals and to Donald Trump. So I think he's going to be in a really tough place answering very difficult questions from the U.S. Senate, and especially when we're a couple of weeks away from an election. I think the American people really have a good sense about how to navigate information and decide what's true, what's false, and who they want to vote for. But Jack Dorsey and Twitter, they think that they're the ones who should determine that for us from their liberal, radical perspective in California. That's my thought anyway. Yeah. What are you hearing on anything on college campus? Are people following this story? You guys, as a younger generation, are all on social media. It might not be Twitter and Facebook, but whether it's Snapchat or Instagram. Is anybody talking about this, Evita?
It's been really sad to see that there seems to be, from a very hyper-political campus, people are very involved, a real lack of concern for the censorship that we've seen last week. And so you and I obviously think it's a big deal. Every freedom-loving American should think it's a big deal, no matter where you are politically. But unfortunately, from what I've seen, there seems to be a lot of people who just don't seem to really care very much. But
I think on that it's interesting. If you're censored, obviously it's a big deal to you. But if you agree with the censorship, you really don't care. It's like this is all fine until they actually censor you. And by the way, they're going to censor all of us at one point if you don't meet their ideological standards. And that's to say that probably everyone, even on the liberal campus of University of Chicago, at one point may not actually agree with where the founders and executives of Twitter actually stand politically.
Right. So you might see a change if the tables start to flip at one point. But as of now, they approve the censorship, and so they approve of all this. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Section 230. Last week we saw not only individual accounts be censored from sharing this New York Post story. The link was unshareable. You weren't able to do it. The Twitter, the Trump campaign account was suppressed. The House Judiciary, Twitter, GOP Judiciary Twitter account was suppressed. Yeah. So was the White House press secretary, and then the New York Post itself. And so, I want to talk to you a little about Section 230 because it's opened up this real debate about censorship in America and the laws that we have for big tech companies and the privileges that they receive. A lot of people, including Clarence Thomas and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, have come out against Section 230 and say that things need to change. What are your thoughts on 230, and can you help explain to us what it even is and what it does?
So I'm going to answer that question. But first, what do you think if all the Republicans, from Kevin McCarthy, all those in the House, and Mitch McConnell, all those in the Senate, and the president, the vice president, Republican assemblymen, Republicans in America, from even the Bonginos and the Rushes, we all posted the New York Post story, and made Twitter take all of us down. So it's actually a war on Republicans. Had we done that, I think we would have seen them back on their heels much more quickly. But oftentimes we don't play those games as well as Democrats, as conservatives.
Mhm.
But I think that would have been a great strategy. But with your
Collectively, we
question,
all say, let's all go to Parlor. Is that what you're saying?
that well, listen, that I'm going to kind of get to that. I think so. First of all, Section 230, in essence, says we're not going to say these social media companies, these internet companies, are publishers, and so there's going to be a freedom that people can post things on their platforms, and the host of the platform, Twitter or Facebook, aren't going to be responsible for what people put on that platform, right? They have an exclusion for liability, right? They can't be held liable for what we put on their site. And what it's done is and by the way, they can actually manage the site and set rules for the site. But what we now see is the rules that Facebook and Twitter have set up are rules that are applied for conservatives, and they're not applied for liberals. And so you see conservative Twitter users having their account suspended. You see the New York Post story that's very negative for Joe Biden, again showing the corruption of his family. That story is not allowed on the platform, and if you post it, your account was locked. And I do think we need changes. And I think first of all, you have to look at the Congress, right? So for a bill to pass, you need the House, the Senate, and the president to sign a bill. And in this next election, I'm pretty hard pressed to see how Republicans are going to win back the House. They have to win 17 seats. Now it's possible, but I don't know how likely it is if we look at the polling right now. So if Nancy Pelosi remains in control of the House, and you have Facebook and Twitter that are going deep in on the Democrat side, helping Joe Biden win the presidency and defeating Donald Trump. If that happens, there's no way that Nancy Pelosi and Democrats are ever going to bring up a bill that's going to reform Section 230.
Right.
They're going to pay off their friends at Facebook and Twitter who helped them win. They're just an extension of the Democrat Party. They're not going to stop they're going to stop a reform to Section 230. They're going to preserve their allies' ability to continue to censor Republicans and let liberals run free. So I don't see legislatively this happening, Evita, unless Republicans have a clean sweep. Right? It's not possible.
Right.
But maybe, and I don't mean to over talk you, but I think if you look at this section, maybe there's we have to think of how the FCC applies it. And truly, if the platform behaves as a publisher, again, deciding what content it wants on and what content it will not allow, then if that happens, they possibly, from an interpretation at the FCC of Section 230, those platforms could again get bumped out of that exclusion, right? But if you have places like Parler, where Parler is one that allows all free speech, unless it's illegal, you have a home to post on our platform, which is what the Parler idea is. Then you let those good companies actually stay into play. But if there's no action from the FCC or there's no action from Congress, then what has to happen is, conservative Americans are half of America. Why are we on Twitter? Why are we on Facebook? This technology is not that complicated. Let's find different platforms. New innovators should create new platforms where we promote freedom of speech, and that'll be a home for all of us to go to and share ideas. And you'll see a decline of Facebook and Twitter because we won't be there anymore. And I think that's the answer: is innovation and creativity coming from those who love free speech and free expression, developing a new platform. So that's kind of my idea on what we should do. I don't know, what do you think we should do, and what do you think will happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's great that you explained that the whole process of what it would take to really make reform Section 230. I mean, it seems like it would be very difficult. And so as of right now, I tend to agree that the way to go is to really, as Americans collectively, to pressure these companies to make changes just by using ourselves to go somewhere else, and then they'll see a decline in their people who have accounts and activity, and maybe they'll start making changes and want to be more free speech. Go ahead.
just kind of one other idea on your point.
Yeah.
If you look at the politics of this, if you to go in somewhere else, the largest conservative or Republican Twitter user is who?
Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump, right?
Of course.
And so President Trump puts out tweets, and so across all the cable news networks and ABC, NBC, they all will say Donald Trump tweeted, and then they'll say what he said. So I thought President Trump months ago would say, I know what's coming down the road. I know that Twitter specifically, and maybe Facebook, they're going to censor me. So I have to find a new platform and bring my people to a new platform. I thought for sure he was going to do that, and maybe put on
Right.
Parler first, what he was going to say, and then 15 minutes later post it to Twitter and to Facebook. And he never did that. So we actually have the ability to have a new platform with this president say, Donald Trump, I don't know if it's called parlayed or said on Parler, this is the quote. And all of a sudden the news media has to say Parler. And that'll drive more people to this free expression platform. But President Trump hasn't done it. And so sometimes
Why is that? Why
conservatives,
wouldn't he do that?
I don't know. It's crazy. I've talked to the campaign. I'm like, why hasn't he done this yet? And maybe he didn't feel like the platform was ready. It wasn't capable, didn't have the followers. I don't know what his rationale was, but it would have been smart for him to, again, drive his content somewhere else, and America would follow. And
Right.
again, I can't wrap my head around it, because it's that kind of leadership we need in this space of a free exchange of ideas, that he's not helping us, get to. And I don't know. How do you see the country developing? How do you see, on a college campus where I'm sure there's limits to speech, which I've heard from you, and you've written articles about free speech on campus, but you'd still think that on social media you have the ability to freely express yourself. What happens if social media continues to clamp down on conservative views and college campuses clamp down on conservative views? How do young conservatives then have a platform to actually express themselves?
Yeah, well, I think that the distinction really is the Daily Wire distinction of leftist versus liberal. And so there are liberals on campus who do see concern, and do have concern, and are are wanting to preserve the freedom that we once used to experience over social media platforms. Leftists, on the other hand, tend to think in the way that we were talking about before, where if it's speech that they don't agree with, then go ahead and censor it. As long as it's not me, they don't care. And right now, it's not them, and so it's not a concern. And I don't really see it ever changing anytime soon, given the way that big tech in Silicon Valley is very far leftist, and the people that are running them, these millennial kids who are these verified fact checkers, and people going through as their job to figure out what is and isn't good content or harmful content for social media. And so I think that people on campus really tend, especially the leftists, to approve of that. And I think that we're seeing a real decline on campus of the classical liberal. Go ahead.
And you see less liberals and more leftists now on campus.
Right. No, for sure. There are definitely. I mean, maybe the problem is that they're more. Maybe the leftists are louder. I'm not sure. I haven't figured it out yet. But it appears that the majority of this liberal campus is actually more leftist than liberal.
So let me ask you a question. So obviously I'm old. So Facebook was
Not
kind of
that old.
Thank you. The first platform we started to use was Facebook, and then we did use Twitter, but I'm on Instagram a little bit. I'm not on TikTok. But what platforms do most college students use? What's the platform of choice, or the top two platforms of choice for you all on campus?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what the person is. I think that what I found is Twitter is actually less used. I mean, it is, but not as much as it is with adults. I found all kids, everybody usually has an Instagram account. People have Facebook, but they usually use it just for planning events, not really for being social. So you'll see that your Facebook mom has a lot more Facebook friends than her daughter does or her son does, right?
Or your Facebook dad.
Or your Facebook dad, right? Kids use Snapchat all the time, and actually Snapchat is really interesting because Snapchat has a thing called Snapchat News, where they approve editorials for Snapchat. So kids will click on MSNBC and the New York Times, but you know who you don't see on the Snapchat editorials is
Who?
the Federalist, is the Daily Wire, is Fox News. They don't exist. I think the Daily Wire is the only, actually, really recently, within the last couple months, the Daily Wire was allowed, the Ben Shapiro show was allowed to have an editorial on the Snapchat news. And they are the only conservative publication that is allowed on the site or on the app. So it's really incredible that kids, mostly millennial Gen Zers, a lot of times they're up in the morning, they look through their Snapchat stories and whoever sent them something, and then they go to the news, and all they see is leftist content or the news with a leftist spin on it. And so it's really incredible how you might not even know it, but in little ways these companies are not only spinning news but also suppressing it, because
Right.
the MSNBC isn't going to tell the same stories that Fox News or the Federalists are going to tell. And so it is concerning, because that actually leads to students who, not only have an intolerance for different ideas, but also aren't even exposed to them in the first place. So when they encounter them, they encounter them with hostility because they haven't even seen them before. And that's what I talk about a lot on campus, is that kids aren't exposed to enough ideas. They really aren't. That's why they run to these safe spaces, or they react in such horrible, awful ways to conservatives on campus who just simply just disagree with them on, like what I said. I mean, I wrote on a whiteboard, I think that socialism is a bad thing. The coronavirus won't destroy America, but socialism will. And I got death threats. I mean, that
Right.
wouldn't happen in years before, because kids would have known that, opposing socialism isn't that, crazy of an idea, but apparently it is today. So
Right,
I don't
because
know.
my generation grew up with the old Soviet Union and the Cold War, and we knew what socialism and communism actually meant for freedom. And
Mhm.
now these leftists have taken over high schools and middle schools and college campuses and basically have now revolutionized what socialism means, and it's really cool now. And they don't actually teach that, where it's tried it never works. What I think is interesting is, as this develops, and I know TikTok is very popular. Again, I don't have it. It's a
I
Chinese
don't
app.
either, actually, but yeah.
Good, because we told you to take it off because the Chinese spy on you. But obviously,
Right.
Chinese are leftists, they're communists, and that's their app, and they're gathering data on us. But President Trump has said, "Listen, we can't have that. It's a national security risk," and he's trying to make a sale. And it looks like Oracle might actually have its offer, to purchase TikTok go through. And what's unique is Oracle is not conservative, but Oracle has a reputation of not being a far group of lefties. And so
Right.
maybe you could get some balance if you have Oracle come in and manage TikTok and bring some balance to a platform that a lot of young people are using, and bring more
Yeah.
fair content to the platform, which could be, I think, very fascinating. So,
Yeah.
but again, I think, as conservatives, going back to your original question, oftentimes we're like, get rid of Section 230. That's the answer. That's what we need to do. We have to be more thoughtful and go, actually, can you make that happen legislatively? And let's be realistic about it. And what actually can the FCC do? Okay, great. There's limitations, with each of those strategies. So if you can't win with those strategies, again, the answer is free enterprise. What we believe in, free enterprise, these other platforms have to be supported by conservatives. We got to go there. We got to post there. That doesn't mean you have to get off these other platforms, but start supporting the newer, younger free speech platforms. And again, we can change the world ourselves if we're able to actually engage in this conversation on what media platforms we participate in. Because as you know, we don't pay for these. We are the product. They're using us as the product. They're taking our information and our data and using it. So give it to the free enterprise site. And by the way, maybe we'll have legislation in the future which protects our data, which would be great. But I think this is going to be a raging debate for some time now on how we deal with these very powerful platforms that are again, San Francisco leftists. So
Right.
anyway, let's talk about Amy Coney Barrett, because
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating. She went through the confirmation hearings. She had 2 days. She testified. She was absolutely brilliant in her testimony. She testified and held up, a blank sheet of Senate paper for her notes, which basically she had nothing in front of her. She
No
was going
notes.
off of all of her memory on case law, but also trying to recall the different things she had written, whether they were law review or law school articles, scholarly articles, or opinions. Just her recall was fantastic. And I think the left was hoping to get a Brett Kavanaugh moment with her. And when they saw her come out as a mom of 7 school-aged children, practicing Catholic, and just an upstanding good citizen, it was really hard to attack her. And so, as we look this week, she's going to go back to the she's not going to go back to the Senate, but the Senate's going to take up her confirmation in committee. It'll probably pass at the end of this week out of committee, and then it'll go to the Senate floor. And next week, I believe it's Monday, they anticipate having the vote on confirming Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Now, that doesn't mean that Democrats can't play games with the rules of the Senate. They probably will. So that timeline could get pushed back into the end of next week, which gets us really close to the election. Right. But as a young woman yourself, and seeing such an awesome performance of from all intents and purposes, a devout Catholic, probably fairly conservative in her personal views, what does that mean for you, and also for other young women that you've come into contact with, as you've seen her come into the spotlight in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, well, we talked about this before, and I think that she did a phenomenal job at the hearings last week. And well, I love that moment when she held up the blank card, because it was such a Slay Queen moment, where she just totally dubbed on all of these congressmen and women who had, and I want to ask you this so you can explain it to everyone, because you explained it to me really, really great. What is the preparation that it takes for congressmen to prepare for these hearings, and what do they do? What do they have as compared to Amy Coney Barrett and her blank card?
Right. So it depends, right? So if you know an issue really, really well, like you're the expert, you'll just go in with a blank sheet of paper. But if you're not, or if you want to play I got you politics, with the person who's testifying, you actually do a ton of prep. You have the Senate, there's probably 100 staffers in the Senate. And if you're, leadership on a committee, you have even more. And they're all doing prep, reading Amy Coney Barrett's, different writings throughout her lifetime, and trying to get I got you questions for her. So they put binders together and questions together and reference books together. And so as the senators are going to ask the question, they have all this reference material, right? And then they have staff sitting behind them to help them out. And it's a whole team effort of research and bodies behind that one senator to ask the question, to go, I got you, Amy Coney Barrett, and we're not going to confirm you. But the bottom line was, she sat there with nothing and repelled all of the attacks. She repelled all of the traps that were set for her by the left, and came out looking absolutely awesome. And by the way, if you see the polling, the fact that, or the question of should we confirm Amy Coney Barrett or not, the poll numbers have gone up consistently since she has come into the public eye, because I think America, no matter where you sit, they're pretty impressed with her, right? So that's that, but that's the background of what happens as these senators prepare for the hearings. And that's what she responded with, was a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, so she definitely, proved to America that she is an extremely intelligent and an accomplished woman at these hearings. And she, one of the best parts we talked about before is, and to answer your question, is how wonderful an example she is to young women, as somebody who can be a devout Catholic and conservative woman who actually has devoted part of her life to her kids and her family. And then she was able to have this really amazing law career on top of it, and graduated at the top of the class. And so she said, she had this great quote, and I want to read it to you. One of the senators asked her, what is your message to young women? And she said, be confident. You shouldn't let life just happen to you or sweep you along. She said, my dad used to tell us, do not make a decision is to make a decision. So I would say, make decisions. Be confident, know what you want, and go get it. Does that sound like somebody who is, barefoot in the kitchen with baby on her hip?
And no, absolutely not. So I look at it too. I go, so often. I want your opinion on this as well. You have the left that says you have to forgo your family and you have to just pursue your career. And if you pursue your family, you can't pursue a career. And I think what an awesome message that Amy Coney Barrett sent to young women across the country that, you know what? You can have a family. You can have a husband. You can raise kids. And you can also have a really amazing career. And by the way, none of us are Amy Coney Barrett's, right? I mean, she was blessed with great intelligence. And make no mistake, as you've seen in our family, it's pretty hard to manage big families and careers and how complicated that can be. But that in our own ways, we can manage, or women can manage, and husbands can manage, families and careers, and it actually can be pretty beautiful. It can be pretty cool that you can have all of that and manage your family, as long as older kids like you participate with younger kids, and moms and dads work together and manage the stress and the schedules of these careers. It can happen, and it can be full in all kinds of ways. And have you heard any feedback on that from young women on campus, or has anybody noticed that on campus, or is this kind of gone like woo, right over their head?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gone right over their head, and what's worse is I think that they do have, like many of the Democratic senators last week, a deep concern that she's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. The senators had other concerns about Obamacare. Was honestly an odd theme of the hearings, but they really have a deep concern about um, about uh, about Roe v. Wade. And so what's really interesting about that is every time that they asked her, like basically, what will you vote on if it comes to Roe v. Wade, because they have a deep concern over her conservatism and her faith. She said, "I can't tell you because of
Right.
your own legislation. I'm not allowed to tell you how I would vote on these issues." And so it was literally laughable that she would just, with every question, just say, I can't let you, I can't tell you, I'm sorry." And they kept asking it, and it honestly made them seem stupid, because they knew that they were going to get that answer with these questions, and they still asked them. Another stupid question that she was asked was, "Are you a white supremacist?" Which was incredible. And then somebody else asked her, "Have you ever sexually assaulted someone?" I mean, it was the questions were truly incredible, and she truly came out on top, and proved that she is an exemplary example for young women. And it was really wonderful to see. And another thing that she did that I was really happy she was able to do was address the attacks that she's received on her adopted children. And one of the senators asked her, like, what do you have to say, and how has this affected you? And she said that it was extremely damaging and harmful to
Yeah.
her children and her family, but it was something that she was willing to weigh out. That she knew that was going to be, as horrible as it is, an attack on her family from the left. And so she weighed the cost and still made the decision to accept the appointment. And so it kind of reminded me of our family, and the way that we knew that there were going to be a lot of negative sides to you running for Congress back in 2010, and you guys still made that call. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on relating to that, or how you made that decision back in 2010.
Well, yeah, no, I thought it would have a big impact on our family, but mom and I thought that we could actually manage that together. Now, mom was a stay-at-home mom at that time, and it was a full effort by both the two of us, but also, as you know, you were involved, you were doing parades, you were participating, you were doing dairy breakfast with me. In public service is not always easy, and though a lot of those who raise their hand and serve, um, they get bashed and they don't work and they're lazy and they're not in DC, 7 days a week, working 7 days a week. But the truth is, if you're not in DC working, you're back at home. And like for me, I used to have a huge district, all were part of 26 counties in northern Wisconsin, central Wisconsin. And, it takes, 3.5 or 4 hours to go from side to side. And so you're gone a lot. And public service is sacrifice, and it should be celebrated, even though we don't agree with maybe everyone who is serving. They are representing a group of Americans who have a distinct point of view that this member of Congress represents. And Amy Coney Barrett, I think we'll see kind of what it means to serve as she moves out of the Notre Dame community and has to move to Washington D.C. and move her family there. These are grueling schedules, but you know what? Thank God we have people who are willing to step forward and who have the perspective of a mom who has school age kids and a husband and is managing those things. I think that perspective is really important on the court. And again, we haven't had that viewpoint, I don't know if ever, on the court. We don't have it right now. And so I'm excited to have her. And by the way, can I go back to, I mean, you made a good point about all of the claims that Democrats were making, right? And one of them being abortion, right? You're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, which, by the way, I would hope that we overturn Roe v. Wade. I think that'd
Very
be great.
unlikely. Just so you know, the way that the court looks is pretty unlikely.
But I think the point that liberals fail to recognize is that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that doesn't legalize abortion, right?
Right.
What's going to happen is it's the abortion question then will go back to all the states. And then you'll have probably California vote to say, listen, we want to have late-term partial birth abortion. We want to say if you have a botched abortion and a baby is born alive, we want to be able to kill it. I mean, that's how radical they are in California. But you know, Texas and even Democrat-leaning states like even Wisconsin or Minnesota, they're pretty pro-life. They'll have different rules and legislation. And what will happen is instead of the courts, 9 justices making decisions for the American people on this really personal issue, for everybody it's personal because, again, as lifers, we believe that life begins at conception. And the liberals will say, well, this is my body. And that's the debate we're having. Shouldn't the people be able to decide that? Shouldn't we be able to decide what's right for us in our communities or our states as opposed to justices deciding for us? And it's that debate, I think, that will take the pressure and the tone down on the issue of abortion. So again, it would be a good thing. And that conversation can then burn in the states and we can have maybe different laws in different states and look at the impacts of those laws.
Yeah.
So
that's a great
anyway,
point.
yeah.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
think
So,
we're kind of out of time, and so it's been great catching up with you, Dad.
hey, good to see you too, Evita. I love your dorm. It looks good.
Thank you. I set up all the lights and everything. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you for tuning in to From C to X with Sean and Evita Duffy.
Bye-bye.